Hi friends, welcome to this latest episode of the Nationalist View. We have with us a very special guest with us, Mr. Joseph Epstein. Joseph, thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedule uh, and being with us. And Joseph Epstein is the director of Turan Research Center, and he is a senior fellow at the Yorktown Institute. We are going to give his detailed bio. It's a pretty detailed bio. We are going to give his detailed bio in the description box and also the link of Turan Research Center. So if you want to access, the content on the website, you can go and access that content. Joseph, before we move on to what Turan Center does, and especially in context of Iran, so we have seen, just kind of in the last 48 hours, the bombing of Hamas by Israel in Qatar, and that seems to have shaken the world. It seems to be, a tectonic movement in the arena of geopolitics. So, how do you see this? Why this happened? And if you could elaborate, a little bit about this.
Of course. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be here. What we saw in Qatar just yesterday was really a transformation in Israeli policy, because before that, there had been Mossad operations in Qatar, but it has been a while since any were carried out. And this is the first time that Qatar has actually been attacked by Israel. And I think this really may end up changing Qatar's calculus, because in the past, Qatar's whole strategy was throwing money at issues, having a massive soft power apparatus, sort of duplicitously using its status as a quote unquote, deal maker, and saying that it's wanted just to end the violence, when in reality it has been supporting various Islamist groups throughout the region, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood, of which Hamas is an offshoot, or others. So I think this was a big move. I'm curious on what's going to happen next. The other thing that was especially interesting is that initial reports at least said that this operation was very likely greenlit by the Trump administration. Now, earlier today, Trump came out against the operation, but this could just be words. If this was actually the case, then that is even bigger. The question that I'm asking myself, however, is that just because this was such a big move, is there a chance that Qatar maybe has grown tired of Hamas, is starting to see them as a liability, because clearly they are going to lose this battle against Israel, and wanted to get rid of them, and this is their way of doing so, allowing an Israeli strike, that is. I think it's probably not the case, but it's a question worth bringing up.
Uh, Now coming back to Turan Center, and then later on we'll talk about Iran also. So I first want to you to tell our viewers a little bit about what exactly Turan Research Center does, and especially in context of your recent work on Iran.
Of course, of course. So the Turan Center focuses on the Turkic and Persian worlds. This means Turkey, Iran, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, and the nations of Central Asia. While there are other think tanks and research centers that focus on some or all of these countries, we found that by looking at them through this ethno-linguistic slash cultural lens, we can see a lot more about them than by looking at them in purely a geographical lens, which is what's usually done. For example, Afghanistan and Tajikistan speak more or less the same language, which helps explain why relations between the two are much more intense than with other Central Asian nations. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan is often delegated to the South Caucasus, although if you look at its politics, especially following the 2020 Karabakh War, you see that they have been one of the most active countries in expanding Turkic cooperation with the Central Asian nations, like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and Turkey as well. Obviously, Iran is the center of the Persian world, so it's a big focus for us. But what many don't realize, I think this is interesting, is it has a very significant Turkic population. Some 30% of the nation are ethnic Azerbaijanis, and until the Pahlavi dynasty, you actually had about 400 years of rule by these groups, first under the Safavid Empire and then under the Qajar dynasty. Um, it was only when the Pahlavis came to power in the early 1900s that this changed. And during the times that the Azerbaijani Turks controlled the empire, it was they controlled military and political affairs while they left the cultural affairs to the Persians. So our recent work on Iran, though, has largely covered the fallout of the 12-day war, although we are planning to write more about the country's economy, its problems with water scarcity, and its relations with Central Asia, Afghanistan, Turkey, and Azerbaijan.
So what are your initial thoughts about how Operation Rising Lion, which this 12-day war that took place? So what has been the impact on Iran? How Iran has been recuperating from it? Do you see any chance of Iran recovering from it? Because it's a well-known fact that Iran, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. So they have been competing with each other for the leadership of the Muslim world. So, but after this 12-day war, so Iran has been weakened considerably. So, how do you see what is the fallout? What is happening inside Iran, and how Iran is responding to it?
So Iran was in shambles following the operation. In general, since October 7th, Iran has slowly watched its decades-old geopolitical strategy unravel. Its key proxies and clients have almost all been decimated, and the ring of fire that it lit around Israel for the past couple decades was extinguished. Then came the 12-day war, which was really the pinnacle of Israel's confrontation with Iran. Jerusalem was able to wipe out much of the country's top brass, destroy a significant part of its missile and nuclear program, and literally fired drones from within the country. Not to mention that the US set a new precedent by striking Iran's nuclear program directly, a move that many for so long have falsely assumed would cause a regional war or a world war even. I remember Tucker Carlson said that if the US struck Iran, all of the BRICS countries would join in to defend it. So you sort of had this narrative going around in the US, which was proven false. So in terms of Iran's response, it was both about saving face domestically and sending a regional message, but more the former than the latter. One thing I noticed that is that the regime also took advantage of the strikes to accelerate certain internal security goals under the guise of fighting Zionist spies. For example, in the weeks following the operation, Tehran ramped up its deportation of Afghan refugees, sending hundreds of thousands back to the Taliban. It also launched an operation in the southeastern province of Sistan-Baluchistan, targeting Baluch separatists that it claimed were working for Israel. The irony, of course, is that while the Israeli operation took place in quite a few provinces of Iran, none of them were even close to the most southeast province of Sistan-Baluchistan. Additionally, you saw the regime scapegoating ethnic Kurds and Azerbaijanis publicly and rounding up quite a few, accusing them of cooperating with Israel. And then you saw Iran threaten the usual targets, mainly Azerbaijan and Iraqi Kurdistan. Iranian proxies in Iraq even shot a couple of drones at an airport in the KRG. Luckily, those were shot down. By threatening its neighbors, Iran sought to show that while it may not be able to strike the US or defeat Israel, it is it is capable of inflicting damage on its neighbors should they step out of line. But the biggest thing is they weren't able to prevent any Israeli attacks. And so now the regime, and especially in the days after the war, the regime was put in a place where it had to explain first and foremost to each other why this happened after they had invested so much in deterrence, mainly their missile program, uh, as well as to protect, of course, the image of the supreme leader, which was significantly damaged across the region and within Iran itself.
So, do you see a possibility of regime change in Iran in the near future? Is there a robust opposition there which can replace the what you call the proteges of the Iranian so-called Iranian revolution, the fundamentalist forces there, and bring back a democracy there? Do you see any possibility of this regime change? Because you mentioned that their image has been dented significantly within the country also. And of course, there's a crackdown which is going on
Yeah.
in name of tightening the security. So, how do you see the possibility of a regime change in Iran?
I don't see it currently. There is no opposition, no organized opposition anyway. And the regime still has control over the streets. So you saw in the days following the war, you had besieged members setting up checkpoints in places like Tehran. They weren't going to allow anything. And also, I think the rounding up of the crackdown on minorities was also part of trying to make sure that they maintain control and are able to deter their own population.
So, now, no, post this conflict and after Iran has weakened, but do you see a possibility of Iran again accelerating its nuclear program? So, what are your
I
thoughts on this? Yeah.
um, There is an argument that some are making that Iran will understand now more than ever that the only way to truly guarantee its survival is to attain nuclear weapons. And I bought into this argument before the 12-day war, but not now. This doesn't mean that the US and Israel shouldn't stay vigilant. It's always a possibility, but I think the attack has not only left the country in shambles and exposed rising issues such as water scarcity, ethnic tensions, and an economy in the gutter, despite the country's immense energy and mineral wealth. Uh, but it also changed the calculus. Before, it wasn't clear if Israel would be able to destroy all of Iran's nuclear weapons, pull off an attack on that scale, and whether the US would even get involved. But now it is clear. And President Trump has even repeated that if the Iranians try to get nuclear weapons, he will gladly repeat the same operation. So just because there's a will doesn't mean there's a way. To get nuclear weapons, Iran will have to reactivate its intel networks, resume the change of productions, and rebuild, and do so secretly. That's very expensive, and it's not even guaranteed to succeed because, as Operation Rising Lion showed, Israel has significantly penetrated pretty much all levels of the Iranian government, and the US can easily send another vitamin B2 over should they see that Iran has resumed its efforts to try to, attain a nuclear weapon.
So, currently, as we have talked about Qatar, then Turkey is also there. Then, a couple of other Muslim countries. So, is Iran off radar right now as far as, US and Europe and Israel are concerned because they feel, that it has been crippled? Or is it that, US and, Europe, of course, the intel agencies will do what they have to do, but overall, I don't see any public discourse about Iran, especially after the 12-day war. So, how do you look at it?
I think there's no discussion because there isn't really too much happening. Iran's capabilities, as you mentioned, have been significantly weakened. And so there isn't so much it can do now. That being said, this regime is deeply ideological. I think it will try to regroup. And so I don't expect it to stay this way for too long.
What about the Iranian propaganda machine? Because I have had conversation with a number of experts from Israel, and there was a general consensus amongst us that Israel might be winning the war on the ground, but as far as the propaganda war is concerned, so Israel is completely on back foot, and Hamas and the Islamists, so they are winning the propaganda war, and this is across the globe. So, and Iranian propaganda machine is known to have played a significant role in that. Now, if you look at this, and of course TRT, Turkey's propaganda arm, basically that also plays a significant role. But if we come back to Iran, so okay, militarily Iran has been crippled badly. But do you think that the propaganda machinery is still intact, or has it also been crippled badly?
Well, so there are two different things. There's the anti-Israel propaganda machine, of which Iran is part, but I would even make the argument it's a small part. You also have other players such as Russia, China, leftist groups, very far right groups that all have it in their interests to weaken either the Israel-US relationship, try to harm Israel's image, or other things in that nature. When it comes to Iran itself, I think the propaganda machine, I mean, I don't think that they won the propaganda war when it came to the 12-day war. They were clearly, they were clearly on the defense. They tried to perform two jobs at the same time and not even very coherently, because internally they tried to stop the panic and shore up the regime's legitimacy after humiliating military setback. Uh, they used a strange narrative, which was, we're not losing to tiny Israel, we're under attack by a massive coalition of outsiders. And they tried to tap into the decades of nationalist memory about coups, foreign meddling, and the 1953 overthrow of Mossadegh. And it's meant to deflect blame from the regime's own weakness and cast the Islamic Republic as victor of great power conspiracies, or victim of great power conspiracies, rather than as an incompetent actor. At the same time, it was using selective messaging abroad to muddy the waters about what's actually happening on the ground. Um, but the paradox is that this kind of narrative can only work in the short term. It might prevent some domestic backlash, but it's also a sign of desperation. And not only, I mean, first of all, ordinary Iranians saw the gap between official claims and their lived realities, but also regional actors could clearly see what happened, like Saudi Arabia, the Gulf, Arab countries, Turkey. Um, for those that Iran is most concerned about, I think they could actually see through what the regime was trying to push forward.
One last question I want to ask. If we take, let's say, October 7 as a reference point when Hamas attacked Israel. So since then, do you see now, and I think another major reference point would be in when the history will be written will be this Israeli attack on, Qatar. So if you look at this whole thing, do you see a realignment of, the forces in West Asia, especially the Islamist forces? Earlier, there was a division between, the Shia crescent and the Sunni crescent. So they were at loggerheads with each other. So, but now, do you see a possibility of alignment between the Shia crescent and the Sunni crescent against, the West and Israel?
You sort of have had that for a while. If you look at Iran's alliances, for example, of course, they have Hezbollah, which are Shia. They have Iraqi Shia militias, both of which are at loggerheads with the Sunnis. In Syria, the regime of Assad, although he wasn't a Shia, he aligned with that camp. The Houthis in Yemen, they're not quite Shias, but still, they've also benefited from Iran's patronage. But Hamas and the Palestinians, I mean, they're Sunnis. The Muslim Brotherhood are also Sunnis. Qatar, which has good relations with Iran, they're also Sunnis. Um, so I think it's a little complex, but at the end of the day, I still would expect them to. I don't think they can actually totally get together because there's so much bad blood, especially in places where they both live, such as Iraq. I think in Lebanon to a certain extent, and definitely in Syria.
So, thank you so much, Joseph, for taking time out from your busy schedule and sharing your thoughts and deep insights with us. And this is it for this episode of the Nationalist View, and we'll be back soon. We'll be back soon with another podcast, another topic, and of course, we expect Mr. Joseph Epstein to be back on our show, regularly whenever he gets time from his busy schedule and share his deep insights. Thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you.